Go behind the scenes with real stories, raw advice, and inside tips on breaking into the entertainment industry. And even that's not if that's not your goal, these interviews revealing how people build successful careers offer a fascinating glimpse into this world. I'm your host Doan Nguyen. Today I interview Brandon Ransbottom, who is a screenwriter and executive producer of Brooker. We discuss how Brooker came to be, how it's been for his brother to be part of this movie, and much more. Enjoy the show. It's a pleasure to have you on my podcast, Mr. Ransbottom.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I understand that in 2009 you earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Florida State Film School. What inspired you to pursue filmmaking and choose FSU's program specifically?
Sure. But yeah, we're going way back in time. I gotta put on my thinking cap here. I think, initially when I chose FSU Film School, it was really because, coming from Ohio originally, it's very far from it's far from the ocean. It's a very different climate than Florida. And I was just looking for a change. And luckily, FSU had a world-renowned school. A number of, really great filmmakers have come out of there. Most recently, I would, call out Barry Jenkins from Moonlight. People that are doing great things out in the filmmaking world. And so I wanted to be a part of that. And I did not get in initially. I had to reapply after I got into the general university, and so I didn't get in for 2 years. But luckily by my junior year, there was room for me, and so I was able to complete that program, and I loved it. It was a great program.
How did you not give up after so many rejections?
Sure. I think the main thing to remember, and I don't know, I feel like a lot of people I talk to face imposter syndrome where you don't feel like you're worthy to do whatever it is that you want to do, right? You know, you want to be a podcaster, you want to be a filmmaker, you want to be an artist, you want to be a firefighter. Like anything that you want to do in life, you can face that imposter syndrome. And I think, having a good support system is really important. Having people in your life that affirm what you want to do, but also I think having some sober judgment of the situation. I'm never going to be a basketball player, right? That's not within my abilities. So if my dream was to be a basketball player, I kind of need that support system to challenge me to kind of think about my goals and examine what about, basketball as an example, like what do I love about that? Maybe there are other ways of accomplishing my goal. Maybe it's not to be a player, maybe it's to be a coach or something like that. So filmmaking was similar. I had to re-examine myself a lot and think, is this something I really want to do? Is this something worth sacrificing for and waiting for? And at the end of the day, I felt like it was, and so that was my direction. And, luckily in this case, it worked out.
Between 2012 and 2014, you worked at Eagle Level Films as a producer and editor, creating content for major clients like GE Appliances, Maker's Mark, Lands and Farm, and Cinemark. What was the experience like, and how did it help you shape your career path?
Sure. Well, with that job in particular, I met an individual named Gary Miller, who ended up directing the feature film Brooker that I imagine we'll talk about. And Gary was my boss essentially at that job. I was his producer. And, he really, as much as film school was important in shaping me, having on the job experience was so important. And that, working with these big clients and realizing that people are just people, you don't have to be intimidated by somebody just because they have a nice title or they work for a big company or even working with talent, like if you're working with somebody who's I to be frank, I didn't work with any like big stars or anything, but we worked with some pretty, I guess, important people, and it can be intimidating, but I think there's a lot of wisdom in realizing like we're all people, we're all humans, like we all need to take a break, we all need someone to, chat with. We get bored, we get excited. So realizing that people are people is really important in those types of environments because there can be a lot of strictures in both filmmaking, but certainly in commercial work, which is what I was doing at that job. And so you're working on these like, with big budgets for just a couple days. You can have big crews and there can be very high energy and people can get very, wound up. And you need, in my mind, to be a producer or a director or someone, that's kind of managing the situation. You need to have that ability to kind of diffuse, emotions a little bit if people are getting, if they're frustrated or even if they're just excited. Sometimes people, there's different positions on a set and people get very excited about what they're doing. And we got to make sure we're being safe, right? And that's like one of the primary focuses that I had at that time was like making sure that the set was safe, both socially and physically.
Who are your creative inspirations, whether filmmakers, writer, visual artists, or otherwise?
Sure, that's a great question. I think, going way back, Steven Spielberg, just as a child, that, he was a director to me. Like that was like if I thought about a director, he was kind of the guy. And so I soaked up all of his movies and really even stuff that he's a prolific producer. So, that like a lot of people that are my age, he was so influential in that way. As I've gotten older, my tastes have expanded, and I think in a weird way, or maybe not a weird way, but in a interesting way, I have really kind of zeroed in on John Carpenter as a inspiration, mostly because of the way that he has managed pretty small budgets for sometimes expansive ideas. And with our film Brooker, we really needed to be able to, paint this big picture of a world with very little money. And I feel like John Carpenter is a filmmaker who can, establish those types of things, can work within really tight boundaries, and kind of gets in and out quick. Very few John Carpenter movies are very long or even longer than 90 minutes, as kind of the that's like the hallmark right now, right? That you can keep something semi-short, and a lot of his films fit that bill. And I think that's something to look up to.
You run your own business as part of your filmmaking journey. What led you to start your own company, and what has that journey taught you both professionally and personally?
Yeah, being your own boss is great and it's not great at the same time. The great part of it is, you're not beholden to one particular manager or boss. Maybe the downside is that now you have 10 or 15 or 20 bosses. Like every client is kind of a boss. But at the end of the day, I get to set my own schedule and I have two kids, and so that's really important. That's more important to me than the work or the filmmaking is being there for my family and being able to, to shape their childhood in a way that I'm around and that I'm present. And I've been able to do that so far for a decade. And that to me is that's the victory of being, running my own business is that I set the standards for people that are working for me. I set my own schedule. I make my own culture. In other businesses, you are a little bit subservient to whatever, you know, corporate says or the manager says. And in this model, I get to set that, but I also have to take all the responsibility if something isn't working as well. And so it's not for everybody. You have to kind of weigh those things, maybe try out some freelance work if you're considering starting your own business and see how you like that responsibility because I know a lot of, incredibly smart, talented people that just would never function well as their own, boss running their own business. Like that's not how they're going to function. So, I think it's you have to come into it with that mindset of let me figure out if this is for me, and if it is, you just got to take the jump. Don't wait or like him and haw about it. You just because when I started, the last thing I'll say is when I started my business, I had one client that gave me the courage to jump from my job at an agency to just start my own thing. In my mind, somehow I thought one client was enough to carry me through. And it wasn't a big client, but in the moment, it felt like, okay, I've got a client. I can do this. Now looking back, I can't believe I did it that way, but it did work out. So, I guess sometimes you have to test your ability to withstand risk.
What has your experience been like as an independent filmmaker? What has been the most significant challenges and what have been the most rewarding moments?
Yeah, well, so far, out of college, I did a feature length film, and that was a great experience. But that was no money. I think we spent maybe $5,000 total on a feature length film. We shot it on the weekends. Everybody worked for free. I edited the whole thing, and I colored it, and I did everything on it, and it was a great experience. But at the end of the day, you get something back that is interesting to look at, perhaps, but it doesn't really have any like intrinsic, or well, maybe it has intrinsic value, but it doesn't have any explicit value. Nobody necessarily wants to watch it or rent it or buy it. Um, and so, I waited another, decade and change, and I've worked on projects on shorts. I've been an assistant editor on a movie. I've been a script supervisor on a movie. I've talked with filmmakers and, worked in an adjacent industry and, in commercial work. And so when I felt like it was time to, make my own film, I think the main joy that I got out of it was that it felt like the completion of a journey to some extent. Now that we're on the back end of the movie and, the post, beyond post, we're looking for exhibition and distribution. Now I realize like this is really the beginning of a new journey, right? As you're when I was a kid, it felt like making a movie would be this huge accomplishment, which it is. But what I've learned is like I just want to make more movies. I want to keep making movies. Like doing it once isn't enough, so to speak. So that is it's exciting and it brings me a lot of joy and it honestly it helps me kind of deal with other things in life and other types of work that maybe aren't my favorite things to do, knowing that there's this kind of creative project in the background that I can work on and I can develop and then I can find my people around, that's been one of the other huge joys of the filmmaking process is finding your people, your little tribe of people that you can rely on, that can be your friends, that you guys can talk about, the project around. Because as an adult, it can be hard to make new friends, like when you're a kid, if there's kids around, you talk to kids. When you're an adult, we all kind of spend all our time trying not to talk to other adults. And, filmmaking is great because you're kind of bringing all these adults together and you're giving them something to talk about. We're talking about the movie, the story, the task at hand, and that I love it. I love having a project and executing a vision.
That was some great answers. Thank you, Mr. Ransbottom.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
States like California, New York, and Georgia are widely regarded as film production hub. Do you consider Florida as a mid-tier state film production, or do you see it as a growing, viable filmmaking location?
So to answer your first question, I do not think that Florida is a filmmaking hub currently. And I do think a lot of it has to do with, the politics of the state, specifically around our state incentives. We don't have good state incentives to bring filmmakers here. We have in the past, and to me, again, I'm biased because I'm a filmmaker, but to me, Florida has a very unique look. Miami is different than Tampa, which is different than Jacksonville, which is certainly different than like Orlando or the middle of the state. Florida's very, um, it's varied. You can go lots of places within a few hours and get a completely different look. And frankly, being from Ohio, if you would have asked me like, does Florida look like California? I'd be like, yeah, there's palm trees and beaches. But if you have been to either of those places, you know that they look very different. And I think Florida is very unique. And I think to your second question, I definitely think that it is a burgeoning a film hub, especially as things change in Hollywood and LA right now. There's like kind of this decentralization of production. And, that has to do with technology, that has to do with politics, that has to do with unions. And I mean, there's a million things that are leading to this, this change. And as you noted, like there are these other states that have popped up, some more recently than others. A lot of them that have great, your Georgia and Louisiana and Kentucky, like places that have great film incentives. You see film growing there, wherever, your streamers move to, your Netflix or your Prime, like those will influence where production is. But I think Florida, despite the fact that we don't have the incentives, despite the fact that we don't have, as far as I'm aware, any kind of real modes of production in here, as far as like a studio driving anything, maybe outside of Miami. I think we have so many resources as a state that I do think that, you will see more and more productions starting up, maybe grassroots like mine, or maybe people kind of trying to come in. It's just historically, it's been cheaper. The best example of the last 10 years is when Ben Affleck wanted to do Live by Night, which takes place partly in Ybor City, which is right where, right around where I live. It was cheaper for them to build it in Georgia than to go to the real Ybor City. They just did a few exterior days of filming, as far as I understand, versus filming in the place. And to me, that's like a really wasted opportunity for Florida and for our huge amount of great craftspeople and cinematographers and caterers. I mean, we're really set up to take care of large crews. So I'm hoping that the more movies like Brooker that come out, the more that we can, push Florida forward in that way.
Let's talk about your latest production, the movie Brooker. What was the process of turning this concept into a complete film, and what motivated you to take on this project? Was there a personal or an artistic vision behind it?
Yeah, so Brooker is about a relic hunter who finds an object that has certain supernatural powers. And, from that description, Indiana Jones might come to mind. Certainly, that is a big influence on the film. Realistically, what Brooker is, in my mind, is that it's kind of a logical endeavor. I wanted to make a movie. I had a number that I could invest in the film because it's self-financed. We didn't bring in investors on this particular project because I really wanted to kind of execute at the level that I wanted to execute at. I wanted to have control over the process because I wanted to show what you could do with our crew and our area, utilizing our resources and not have anyone breathing down our necks or asking for changes or, all the things that typically happen you know, once you bring in financiers, or certainly if you're working on the commercial end of stuff, you have a client that's kind of dictating what you do. So I was the financier and I was the client and I was the writer. Um, all that being said, there's no way that the film would have come together without our amazing crew. And, I think just having the resources like that, the people resources totally makes it possible. Like you can make any kind of film in this area. And, Brooker was that logical execution of, what do we have available to us? What can fit within our budget? And, what can we afford? And so when we put all those aspects together, we got Brooker and, the story is fun. I like the story, but, I don't think of this like a lot of first-time filmmakers. I think their first film is like very precious in a way, they feel like it's their one shot to get something right and figure it out. And maybe naively, I don't feel that way. I feel like this is almost the calling card. I want to show people what we can do. All my babies, my precious projects, I still have to make. So this one I could make with a little more sobriety. That I could we could cut things if we needed to. We could reshuffle things, and I didn't feel devastated by that because I knew like, well, the point of this movie is to get it made. It's not to, for me to make some grand statement. I certainly have movies that I've written that could maybe do that in the long run, but right now it's about getting people to understand the vision of, what we want to do, what our team wants to do.
I read that your brother Carl worked on the project and was the production designer, including designing the film key element, the mask. He also have experience with Universal Creative. What was it like working with your brother on such an integral part of the production, and how does his background contribute to the overall quality and vision of the film?
Yeah, I loved working with my brother Kyle Ransbottom. He is brilliant. He's very talented, and he did work at Universal Creative, so over at the Universal Studios parks in Orlando. And for Disney, he's Cirque du Soleil. He's had a ton of clients, and he's very, very talented. He helps design stage uh, productions, and he does all like the stage design. And that's my brain doesn't work like that. So we're pairing with him, it was great because we do have a common language as brothers. I can say I kind of want it to look like this movie or that movie or this book or whatever. I can show him pictures of things, and I know that he's going to get it. He always has. He just has that ability to do that, and it certainly came through in the movie. If you go to, brookermovie.com, you can get, a little taste of, the mask that he designed. You can see some of the cave set that he built. He built this whole cave set inside the back of a church that we were renting a room out of for the movie. And, it looks like you're in a cave, like a dark, dirty, wet cave. And that was all him. I gave him like very little design notes, and he just ran with it and figured it out. So as brothers, I think it was a great experience that we got to have together.
Brooker was mentioned on August 16th. I had a chance to watch the film on YouTube. It looks awesome. On what platform is the film currently available besides Brooker.com?
Sure. So right now we are in the midst. This is some of the stuff I'm learning as a first-time filmmaker. The film we're waiting to hear back about some film festivals if our submissions have been accepted or not. And part of the film festival process is that they don't want your film to be available for rental or mass consumption, on a streamer or anything like that. They want it to be somewhat exclusive to their film festival. So where that puts us at right now is that we're a little bit in a holding pattern. We're kind of waiting to see like, are we going to be at a bunch of film festivals in the next few months, or is our film going to function better as a self-released movie? Um, I don't know exactly how the film festivals will go, but I do feel pretty strongly that come the beginning of the year, there's a high probability that Brooker will be available for rental through self-distribution because frankly, there's not like big stars in our movie. Our movie is filled with great actors, but they're not necessarily big stars. And so, that can be hard for a distribution company or, a studio or a streamer to spend money on because they want some assurance that people are going to want to watch the movie. And I think the movie turned out nicely, but at the end of the day, it takes 90 minutes for someone to agree with me or not. And these people are working in like 30-second chunks, like what is it? If you watch like 2 minutes of a Netflix movie, it counts as a view or something for their algorithm. So, when you're working in that world, it's really hard to compete, especially when there's tons of great movies that are coming out that have big names of people that that maybe you grew up with in movies, and now they're just like in movies that are coming out straight to streaming, or straight to rental. And so, we can't compete with that. We have to build our audience a little more organically. So I think the self-distribution model is gonna be where it's at for us. Because at the end of the day, we need one person. We need one person who believes in our team. Obviously, the movie's already made, so it's less about believing in the movie. It's more about believing in what we were able to accomplish with the resources that we had. Our budget was pretty small, and I think we made it look very big on screen.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Ransbottom. It was a pleasure to talk. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much.
You can help me grow my show and spread awareness by just reaching out to one friend and texting them. I would also like to bring your attention to my friend's podcast, the World History Addicts Podcast. The link for his latest podcast is available on my Instagram page, Entertainment Fanatics Pod. Thank you for listening. See you next time.